can start again. Okay,
Hi everyone, I'm Ruozi from candidate from the Southern California. Actually, I'm a professor of PhD and this paper is with my topic agriculture. We're trying to understand how market power, especially among intermediaries in agriculture sector, can affect farmers' climate change adaptation. So first, it is well documented that climate change can have very negative impact, especially in agricultural sector in terms of electricity. But also, the research has shown that there is very little adaptation, especially in the long run. Then the natural question is, what stops farmers from adaptation? Or in general, what hinders adaptation in farmers? So this is going to be the focus of the paper. So the specific angle from the paper is trying to understand how pre-existing market power can actually affect farmers' adaptation. So what is the role of free markets in facilitating this adaptation? So the specific research question is, first, does this spatial market competition affect farmers' adaptation to conditions? So I will talk a little bit more about what does this spatial market competition mean. So it's basically coming from this kind of policy-induced market competition. So that's the next data we are going to study in the context in India. And the second, we do document that there is huge, the spatial competition does affect farmers' adaptation to climate change. Then the next question is how farmers can adapt to free market, and then what exactly is the mechanism there for them to adapt. So this is the second question. And lastly, we want to understand how important it is for farmers to have free market or facing relatively less market power for them to adapt. So for here, we build a general equivalent model to understand what is welfare loss if we actually impose this kind of market power or market restriction in farming industry. Okay, so I'm going to focus. This paper is going to be focusing on India's agriculture sector. So why I focus on India? So first of all, India is a very important context to study, mostly dominated by farmers, especially small farmers, and they are facing a lot of market power from intermediaries, which there are millions of farmers, but the number of intermediaries are much more limited. But in general, it's quite challenging to study how market power affects adaptation of farmers for the following reasons. So first of all, competition is not necessarily directly observable, especially competition itself can be super endogenous. So it makes it harder to study how competition is affecting farmers' adaptation potential. And then we also need enough spatial variation in terms of both market power as well as climate shock to study this question. So we need to study the question in the context where we have both of the variations here, and India provides a perfect setup for this question. So why Indian context can be helpful. First of all, is the spatial competition is basically coming from this policy in the agriculture market, in the agriculture sector. So again, I will talk a little bit more about how this policy was created and why it can have a distortion in the market power in the farming industry. And also the Indian context, again, the farmers households account for around 38% of the total household. It's a super significant population to study. And also we have enough variation in India to study how different farmers in different locations react to different competition, market power measures here. And they also expect the specific climate shock I'm looking at in this context is the heat or heat exposure. So there's also significant amount of heat exposure heterogeneity here across all India. And this also leaves crop very vulnerable to this heat exposure. But also this provides enough variation in terms of climate shock to study this question. So let me tell you a little bit about the background of this agriculture trade in India. So this background will give us the explanation why there is actually a spatial competition heterogeneity across India, and that we can use of that to study how this spatial competition affects farmers' adaptation to climate change. So the trade in agriculture sectors in India are mostly dominated by two laws. The first one is the so-called Essential Commodities Act. So this basically prohibits farmers from hoarding their produce, which means you cannot really just save your produce this year and you sell next year. You have to sell it quite soon. So this makes the whole modeling part much easier because you don't really have to decide how much inventory or how much time you want to wait until you sell the product. So this makes the context much easier to study. But more importantly, the second act is called so-called autonomous state level APMC act. So what essentially this act does is that it restricts farmers to sell only in those government-designated marketplaces within the same state. So which means there are all these markets that government set up around the 1950s, and then farmers were only allowed to sell in those markets. And more importantly, farmers are not allowed to trade across border. So you can immediately see there can be potential border discontinuity next school to understand how this different competition across states can affect farmers' adaptation to climate. Let me just give you a quick image to show what does this market look like. So those are the markets that were built around 1960s. And then farmers basically across the small villages, they put they ship their goods to those markets, and then the bargaining and the pricing basically was set up in this market. So again, these two laws, the implications of the laws basically first, farmers are not allowed to hoard, and then second, they can only sell in those government-regulated marketplaces to those intermediaries without trading across border. So we can see there can be this market or the spatial competition differences across jurisdiction boundaries, and we can explore that to understand how market competition affects adaptation behavior. So this just gives you an idea about how many markets out there in India. So you can see these black dots are basically those APMC markets. There are around 3,000 markets all over India. So we are going to study basically all states in India. Only still exemption is that, for example, Kerala state here doesn't have APMC market. So we basically rule out those states without this APMC law here. So to study how this spatial market competition affect climate change adaptation, we need two sets of data. The first one is the produce or the output kind of data. So here we get this market level price and the levels. So market again, this is the APMC market. There are around 3,000 markets in India. So we know there are daily arrivals and prices for around 344 commodities. Eventually, we use 52 major commodities. We didn't select the commodities in the data, rather we just rank the commodities based on the sale and get the most significant in the data. And more important measure here is this market competition, because we know there's APMC markets all over India, but how does that translate to the spatial distribution of competition measure? So here we define the competition measure as follows. So imagine your market. So we define this market level competition measure. So imagine your market. How the competition level is depends on a few factors. So the first one is depends on how many markets are around you. So if there are more markets around you, then you face basically higher competition from others. And second, the size of other markets also matter, because if there are around huge markets next to you, then you also face relatively higher market competition. Lastly, we do this way by inverse distance, because if the markets around you are very far away from you, then you have relatively lower competition. You face relatively lower competition. So this competition measure basically is at market level. So you can imagine this as sort of market access, and we use this measure to the competition measure to understand what are the market level competition is inside the markets. So here I give you a spatial distribution of the competition measure. So again, we define the competition measure at the market level, but we aggregate those competition measure into this district level so that we can have a better sense about what the distribution looks like. You can see there is still a significant amount of heterogeneity, spatial heterogeneity in terms of the competition measure. And this helps us try to identify how this competition affects adaptation to climate change.
How did they decide how many APMC markets?
Yes. So this is like due to historical reason. They follow the Britishers. The Britishers originally they built this market, and after independence, India decided to follow this market and keep those markets and started to trade in those markets again. So it's mostly like historical reason. But again, I agree there can be selection, even selection of these markets because those markets can be built a long time ago, but also in like a super productive areas or things like that. But in the empirical strategy, I'm going to show you, we're going to explore the border discontinuity rather than looking at the whole market space, that there can be a selection.
This looks like it's very linked to population.
Exactly. So that's why this even this market could be endogenously built. That's why we're going to use another strategy to also identify that. Okay, so we talked about a competition measure and the farm produce. And the other set of data we need is basically the climate. We need to know what is the heat exposure, or basically the variation of climate change. So we get this data at a very high resolution level. So it's, I have it written here, so it's the micrometer by micrometer spatial grid level. And what we essentially get is this so-called growing degree base. So we separate the temperatures into different beams, so below 15, and then 15 to 20, 20 to 25, etc., and then above 35. So above 35 we define it as extremity. We calculate how many days that are following each of the degree, each of the temperature beam, and understand how having one more day in each of these beam affect the produced performance. So there's some technicality, some details here. Basically, there are also two growing seasons in India, and then we separate crops based on their growing seasons, and then calculate the growing degree days based on each season.
Sorry. We use the same beam categories across the two agricultural growing seasons. The one with the number of 13, above 13 degrees Celsius stays between October and March.
Yes, so
depending on the crop that you grow.
Yeah, so we make the temperature being consistent because so that it's easier to compare different temperatures or different crops. So we make consistent, but we also do some robustness check to make the temperature beings more like granular or like more aggregated to get any robustness check.
Or could you make the agricultural season distribution and the number of days of certain percentiles, for example?
Yeah, exactly. So but also a lot of crops they were growing in both of the seasons. So it's not like one season there's kind of crop, the other season the other time. So it's less concerned. Now comes to the empirical strategy. So again, we are trying to understand how those market competition affect farmers' adaptation. So by adaptation, I mean their produce fall too much compared to if farmers do adapt, then they will lose less of their decline in crops compared to without adaptation at all. So one endogenous concern we talk about is that those even though it's due to historical institution, those APMC markets can still be endogenously selected. So we implement this border discontinuity design with market players. So let me first just show you what do I mean by border discontinuity. So remember when we talked about the background, the law basically was saying that farmers could not trade across borders. So across borders there can be a discontinuity in the market level competition. So that's the variation we're going to explore.
Clarification. So is your outcome, or is it like sensitivity of yield to climate shock?
Yes.
From that you're inferring how, like, if you're more sensitive to climate shock, you're less adaptive.
Exactly.
And is that outcome in terms of quantity or revenue?
I see. So I will show you two different results. So first of all, in terms of the decline overall, in terms of sales, so that's revenue. But also, I'm going to show you specifically how prices are actually affected as well based on the competition. Because one mechanism we are thinking behind this is that when farmers are facing relatively lower, like a market power, they're able to get higher price than their commission. And that's how they are able to. I'm going to show you that separate result later, but in the main result here, it can show you farmers adapt or not. But I'm going to show you the sales.
I just feel like adaptation, kind of more physical output.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, you care about income, so prices are definitely relevant, but in terms of like the farmer's technology, I'd say that's more fun.
I agree. So in the final mechanism part, I'm also going to show you farm level data, so that you'll know the output reasons quantity and stuff. But in the main result, I'm going to show you the market. Oh, let me just tell you the illustration of how this empirical strategy works again. So you can see this this wave line basically in the state border. We have two kinds of pairs. The first pair is basically the pair that fits rapidly thin competition measure. So under this scenario, no matter you're in good weather or bad weather, the difference in the crop produced should be the same. But on the right hand side, when you face this discontinuity in competition measure, and also when you face different kind of weather scenarios, then the difference in produce should be different. And the difference is basically capturing how much farmers adapting in our context. So the good thing about this border discontinuity design is that it can help us control for some unobserved factors element competition across the border. So for example, the culture, there can be like demand or weather or soil quality, and we believe that those factors that cannot be just discontinuous. So even like the soil quality, for example, with weather, there shouldn't be like a discontinuity just across state border. So we are just basically assuming that across state border, the only thing that is different is basically the competition measure. And of course, there can be something that is different. There can be some other factors that are different. We're trying to control as much as possible, and we're going to show you in the effects here. So this is the regression, the main regression specification we are having to understand how the growing degree rate affects the arrivals basically in each market. So this is the commodity market pair and the state and year level. And this summation here is telling us what is how does each of this how does each additional growing degree day in given type of thing affects arrivals. But more importantly, we're looking at how this is interacting with competition measure. And we control for precipitation, which is another very important factor that affects the farmers' produce. And then we have a set of fixed effects to control for any other factors that can also be different across borders. The first thing is the cross-year fixed effect. So this is trying to control for the overall demand for a specific crop. And we have market pair year fixed effect. So this is trying to compare the difference across market pair that is common to different crops. So you can imagine factors like transportation cost, how good the road is, how what is the quality of the roads are to create a group. So this is trying to control for different for the market specific effect that is same across different crops. And finally, we put this state model from decade specific effect. This is trying to control for any government-led like program trying to help farmers to deal with climate change. So again, we are assuming because we along the state borders, we still have significant amount of peers. We still have variation for that. But here it's trying to say, oh, if a certain state government is trying to help farmers deal with climate shock, then it's going to be captured. So again, what this black list is basically the competition across the border as we trying to understand how that affects it.
I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but how do you deal with farmers switching from one crop to the other as a form of adaptation?
I see. So that is a good question. Here we look at the commodity specific effect. Because so one thing, because this is the average impact. So if farmers substitute one from one to the other, you shouldn't see much drop in the produce. So because this is the average impact. But it's interesting to look at different crops here, understand. But another thing is that so the timing here is a bit tricky here. So remember the growing the growing degree day basically measure the temperature exposure when farmers grow these crops. But once you grow, then the relaxation of climate shock arrives. So at that time, it's harder for you to switch to another crop. So what you can do, or we will show in the mechanical part, what farmers do is that after the shock, they started to grow some like fast growing like vegetables or something like that, diversify the crops. But it's harder for them to completely grow some new crops before the relaxation of
I have a quick question. Are you looking at differences in growing degree days from a long-term average, or is it just the period by period?
Yes, it's period by period. So what we are capturing here is basically short-term adaptation rather than long-term. So it's period by period.
Sorry, another clarification question. Could you guide us through the timing of like crop decisions, bringing them to market, and then you're doing this period by period, I guess, some sort of updating given previous climate shocks?
I think, yeah. So I have a slide for the model part about timing, but then now to make the results more understandable. So the timing is as follows. So our farmers first decide what crop to grow based on their expectation. And then the production occurs. The production occurs can also be a result of this climate shock realization. And after that, farmers going to decide which market to sell. So this depends on so this will be farmers which market to sell depends on how many markets available nearby and trading costs, etc. And then the farmers arrive in the market, and then the price is decided at the market with the bargaining with the intermediaries. And then this intermediary market pairs and intermediaries sell their produced products. So this is the timing of this setup. Right. And come back to the specification here. So yes, so this is how we are trying to capture how the different growing variations in temperature affects the levels of the farmers at the market level. So here's the table showing how different how these things interact with competition measure. So remember, first of all, when the market pair across border face the same competition measure, their different levels in market pairs should be the same under no matter under best scenarios or good scenarios. So you can see this row here is significant. So this is saying that so when farmers are facing cross borders, when different market pairs are having exactly the same competition measure, then their difference in levels should be affected by that. But when they are having different competition measure across borders, we do see this difference here. So just to interpret the result here, so we can imagine this magnitude here is that if we increase for a farmer who faces the 75% of the competition measure versus a farmer who faces 25% of the competition measure, one more growing degree days will lead to 4.5% percentage more in terms of revenues. So basically saying that farmers are losing less when they are facing higher competition. Okay. Then the question now is that why farmers in those higher competition areas are adapting or they suffer less compared to farmers in areas with more market power? And the second question is, what do they do differently? What do farmers do differently in high competition areas so that they suffer less? So here's the questions we are trying to answer in the next few slides. So first we look at the prices. So before we show you the market level results based on the sales, now I'm just specifically showing the market level results based on the price. So I'm trying to understand how this market competition, virtual market competition affects. Just without looking at the result, we can imagine for farmers who are living in high competition area, and then when the climate shock strikes, the overall supply is going to decline because of the climate shock. So the price should increase, in terms of final consumer price should increase. Then how much price increase the farmer can face depends on the market power from intermediaries. So for intermediaries who have relatively larger market power, they can enjoy the higher price from the final consumer without having too much price increase to farmers. So this is what we see here from the regression. So when farmers are facing relatively higher competition measure, we do see a relatively higher prices compared to farmers who face relatively lower market measure. So this is saying that for farmers who face higher competition, they are able to get a higher price, and we believe this is one of the mechanisms that helps them to better adapt to condition. So again, this doesn't explain what do farmers do differently when they face higher competition. So this is the next set of results we're going to see here. And this result is based on the farm level, household level, farm level survey, and trying to understand what exactly farmers do differently when they are facing climate shock or when they are living in different kind of competition areas. What do they do differently? So here we look at land usage, labor usage, and other like inputs such as irrigation and equipment usage, and fertilizers. And lastly, we're looking at the crop mix. So crop mix we construct this Herfindahl index. The higher the Herfindahl index, the lower diversity the farmers perform. So this is saying that. So if we look at the last row here, we can see when the farmers are facing the same climate shock. For farmers who live in high competition area, they tend to increase their land usage, increase their labor input, and also increase their input costs, for example, fertilizer and irrigation. So this is what farmers do differently. Another thing is in terms of crop mix. So farmers also try to grow more diverse crops. When they are actually in higher competition area, they're able to grow more diverse crops as well. So we believe this is how farmers are adapting. Because they have the price increase, they are able to enjoy it. They are able to also give some benefits of climate shock because the price is increasing, and this enables them to adapt to climate shock better.
Sorry, what is the role of government policy in fixing prices? Is that applicable here?
Yes. So in India, there is a minimum support price for selecting. Yes, for selecting crops, but it's minimum price. So it's not like a price premium. So, and the climate shock, the price can be much higher than the minimum price. We talk about, so before what we showed is that we show farmers in high competition area, they are able to produce relatively more. And also the reason why they produce more is because they can get the relatively higher price and they're able to increase their input to better adapt. And now what we're trying to say is that how important this factor is, how important this free market is for farmers to adapt. What is welfare loss if we do not have this free market and we have restriction? That's what the model is trying to do. So we discussed about the timing here, so I'm going to speak here. But I mean, due to time limitation, I'm just going to show you the results from the model. So we have two kind of scenarios. The first one is if we still have the trade restrictions, which means farmers are not able to trade for cross-border. We found that climate change will decrease the welfare by around 2.1% of agriculture. But if we are able to remove this trade restriction, which means farmers can trade freely across borders, then the climate change will reduce welfare by roughly less, like 1.8% of the agriculture. So this means that farmers are able to suffer like around 13.8% less when they have relatively higher market competition by removing the state buffer.
So my understanding is that in 2020 there were some reforms, and to some extent the restrictions were removed, right?
So there was a lot of protests going on from farmers side. Actually, those protests were mostly from intermediaries. So the reform was trying to remove the minimum support price, and then there was a lot of protest against it. And my understanding is that the law was not successful to pass. So it's not. So it's still stay the same. Yeah. And just to compare the effect to the literature, so Casino and all they estimate a similar effect, but in the context of international rather than Beijing like a domestic change. And they found the welfare loss is around 0.7%. But if we zoom into the within country trade, we'll see the loss is relatively higher. So you can see the domestic trade buyers are even more significant than international trade buyers. So that's pretty much the paper. So in conclusion, we do find that climate change. So first of all, adaptation is essential to really flatten the damage curve from climate change. And we do find that this kind of institution-led distortions in terms of market power among intermediaries can really cause negative effects on farmers' adaptation in India. And second, this accessibility of this kind of adaptation response depends on the institutional. So the message of the paper is that when we are trying to look at climate change adaptation, it's important to look at this kind of pre-existing disclosure. You can build that institution for that market to understand how that will impact the adaptation activities. So this lesson can be derived more broadly. So first of all, it's not really only in the agriculture sector, maybe some other institutional friction can distort the adaptation behavior in other sectors as well. And then the intermediate market power in agriculture is not something unique to India. It's very prevalent in many developing countries. So that's why it's also a very significant issue to deal with when we think about farmers. So lastly, when we think about adaptation, it's not just the consumers adapting or farmers adapting. We have to look at the interaction between government and private individuals so that they can better understand how they deal with climate change and how they internalize this climate change cost when they get into regulations. Pretty much the. Thank you very much.